Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 1 of our 6-part Amonkhet full set review. Today we're going to look at all of the white cards. Now, if you've seen our set reviews in the past, you probably know what to expect here. We're going to look at these cards with a limited focus, but whenever applicable, if I feel like a card is going to be decent in perhaps standard or another format, I will mention that. But first and foremost, we're going to look at their limited play ability. Now, quickly before we get started, if you check out the description below, you'll find a couple ways to help support the channel, help keep us doing what we're doing. And the first one is through Patreon. And we're actually really close to our next Patreon goal, so if you get a chance, check that out. Now, another way is through our Amazon affiliate store, and that's basically a compilation of Amazon links where I've brought together all sorts of Magic the Gathering products. But if you make any purchases from any Amazon sellers through those links, a small percentage will come back to help support the channel. It goes a really long way. So thank you in advance for looking at those. And having said that, let's get into the cards. We're going to start off with Angel of Sanctions. Now, this one's a mythic, but if you're lucky enough to open it, this is a fantastic limited card for you. Very, very first pickable, and there's just a lot of raw power here. A 3/4 for 5, and it has an O-ring effect when it enters the battlefield, taking care of potentially a lot of different non-land permanents that your opponent controls. That could be anything from a planeswalker, if they're really lucky, or even an enchantment, artifact, or creature, what have you, right? Now, it also has a bomb on top of it, so if your opponent does deal with it, there's a good chance for 6 mana later on in the game, it's going to be coming back and doing the whole thing over again. That's actually pretty amazing for limited. As far as standard goes, unfortunately, at the 2 white and 3 casting cost, it has a lot of good competition, namely Avacyn out there. So I think decks are going to really gravitate more towards Avacyn if they're looking for something like this in the 5 spot, other than this card, at least for the immediate future. Maybe someday when Avacyn rotates out, that story could change a little bit. Anointed Procession. Now, my biggest issue with this card is simply that it costs 4 and it really does nothing on its own. It's completely contingent upon other effects. Having said that, I'm not going to first pick this card, but if pack 1 is drawing me into the direction of perhaps a lot of token generation or embalm, and I see this early on in pack 2 or pack 3, it does become a better pick for me. It's definitely playable, but you do want to have a really strong deck backing this up, I think. For all those reasons, I don't see it seeing play in standard. I just feel like at this point, it's just too contingent upon other things going on, and that's usually a recipe for disaster in a strong competitive format. I will say, though, Commander, this could be a really fun Commander card in a token deck. Anointed Priest. This is a fine 2-drop. 1/3 stats are just fine for you in limited, and it has Embalm to boot. And if you have enough tokens coming into the battlefield, this is basically a soul sister for tokens, which is kind of awesome. So again, if you're into, say, maybe zombie tribal with a lot of zombie tokens or some Embalm going on in your deck, this is going to become even more playable for you. This is a card that you'll be able to pick up probably a little bit later in a pack and find some value there with a pick like this. Approach of the Second Sun. This is an interesting card. I've really thought hard about would I play this in limited if I got it. Here's the conclusion I came to. I'm a gambler, so I'm going to play it. But I would not pick this pack 1, like first pick, and then try to build a control shell around it or something like that. What I would do is try to build a strong deck that has some white mana in it. And this would be like a plan B backup win condition if I find myself in a grindy game. Now, maybe the more adult thing to do would be to sideboard this and bring it in if game 1 was grindy. But like I said, I'm kind of a gambler, and I'm probably going to give it a chance and try to get that backdoor win. As far as standard goes, now some folks have been trying to think of ways to brew around this. Maybe Etherworks Marvel could interact well with this if you had 4 copies of this in your deck. My only concern with that, though, is there's going to be a lot of artifact hate, I think, in the format, considering this set is giving us a lot of it. So I think that's going to hurt a lot of the engines that could make a deck like that playable. Aven Mind Sensor. This, of course, is a reprint from Future Sight. This is the first time we see it in the modern era Magic border. And it's a very decent limited card. I mean, a 2/1 flyer with flash for 3 is just fine for you. Might not always make your cut. Sometimes you'll have better 3-drops. There's actually a lot of really good 3-drops in white, and you'll see these as we go through today. But it's still very, very playable regardless. And if your opponent has, say, some Evolving Wilds, they're trying to go a little bit deeper with colors, you could really hose them by sideboarding this in if you're not main decking it. As far as standard goes, I think it's strong enough to see some standard play. Maybe it's out of the sideboard, but we have seen this repeatedly in the past, not only see some standard play, but also even modern play. So we know it's a powerful card. It's great in modern against fetch lands, obviously. Binding Mummy. This is a decent bear with upside. I mean, 2/2, and if you're in a zombie-themed deck or even some Embalm in your limited deck, you're going to get extra value here. Again, another card that you can probably pick up pretty late in a pack and still find a little value if you need another 2-drop. And keep in mind, the 2-drop spot of your limited deck is going to be where you need the most meat and potatoes, right? You probably need the most cards at that spot. 2 and 3 are going to be imperative to the success of your deck. Next, we have Cartouche of Solidarity. Now, I'm usually not a huge Aura fan, but I do like the cartouches. They have a few things going for them. First off, I think they're competitively costed. This one only costs 1. Secondly, they give you a bonus effect. So even if you get 2 for 1, the effect will still happen. You still get something out of it. And thirdly, and maybe most importantly, they combo well with Trials. Now, a word of warning in Limited. I'd say don't try to get too cute with those combos. Like, 1 or 2 cartouches, 1 or 2 trials, I think could be a nice kind of sub game where you find a little bit of value out of it. But if you go too deep, you might compromise the consistency of your deck. Because you do have to remember, these things cross into 5 colors, so you want to be careful with your mana requirements. As far as standard goes, I do think they could see some late standard play here and there, but I also feel like you're not going to see like the cartouche trials deck or anything like that because of the mana requirements, and also the fact that they're contingent upon being played in the correct order. Next we have Cast Out, and this is extremely solid, first pickable, white removal in the format. This is going to be really good for you. It costs 4, it has flash, can target any of your opponent's non-land permanents. So again, covers a wide variety of problems. And it also has cycling, so if you're already ahead on board state and you don't need to exile something, you can simply cycle this away to keep the pressure on your opponent. I love the versatility. This will also cross over into standard as white removal, I have no doubt. Maybe on the sideboard sometimes, but this is very, very good. Compulsory Rest. Now this is the pacifism effect for the set, and I will say, okay, it's maybe not as exciting as the previous card we saw, but at the same time, this is still really good removal. Very, very high pickable, maybe sometimes even first pickable. Now, there is Embalm in the set, so granted, there are certain targets where this card's not going to feel super great against. I'm not really worried about the whole clause that my opponent can sacrifice the creature and gain 2 life. However, if I throw this on an Embalm creature in a pinch because I'm backed into a corner, then it's not going to be long before my opponent can get that creature back online. That's what I'm more worried about. But having said that, there's still a lot of amazing targets in the set for this card, so don't let that hold you back. As far as standard goes, pacifism effects usually don't cross over too well into standard most of the time because there's just more definitive removal spells that are out there. Next we have Devoted Cropmate, and here's another real strong card for limited. Again, another one that's potentially first pickable in some packs. You get yourself a 3/2 for 3. Those are just fine stats just to begin with. But on top of that, you have the potential to periodically bring some of those 1 or 2 drops, usually 2 drops when you're talking limited. You know that's going to be a meaty part of your curve. Bring some of those creatures back from the graveyard directly to the battlefield every once in a while. There's a lot of value to be had here. This card is awesome for limited. As far as standard goes, I think it's going to see play there too. I really think we're going to see a white weenie deck, perhaps with Always Watching kind of being the linchpin holding the whole thing together. You play this card with Always Watching, there is a ton of value to be had there. This could certainly see a fair amount of standard play. Jerez Resolve. I don't have too much to say about this. I think this is a nice late pickup though in limited. I like running maybe one of these in my deck. It does a couple things for you. It's a nice little combat trick. It cycles away if you don't need it. I like that a whole lot actually. And also that untap clause lets you perhaps mitigate an exert cost at least one time during a game, and that could be very good for you too. So I really like this card. Again, it's not something you have to pick early. It's common. They'll be floating around late in the draft, but it's a nice little utility card to pick up a little bit later. Dusk to Dawn. All right, here's the first of the split cards. This one's quite good. I mean, just the Dusk part is really, really strong. Destroy all creatures of power 3 or greater. Obviously, you can pick this up, maybe first pick, and then draft a lot of smaller creatures and really take advantage of that clause, as well as the second part. You can definitely take advantage of that if you know what you're drafting around, right? This card is phenomenal. And yes, I do think this will see standard play as well. This could potentially be really good, not only in white weenie builds, but maybe even zombie tribal. This is one I think we're going to see a lot of in the future. Fanbearer, another strong limited card. I'm usually not a huge fan of a lot of the 1-drops that we get nowadays in limited, but this one's just fine by me. A 1-drop, and even though it ties up my mana a little bit, it lets me protect myself against my opponent's best creature threat. This is just fine. Very high pickable. Forsake the Worldly. Okay, so artifact hosing is a big part of this set. They really want to reset the format and kind of let you leave Kaladesh behind and start playing with your shiny new cards, and that's normal. They always do stuff like that. But here's White's version of it. Now notice a lot of these cards that hit artifacts also hit enchantments. You're going to see that in this example here. There are a lot of good enchantments out there. Now, I would probably not main deck this in limited. I'm probably going to bring this in out of the sideboard if I need it. But I wouldn't be super punished if I just main decked it, because it does have cycling, which is actually pretty cool. Much like limited, I think this is a standard sideboard card that we'll see played in that format too. Gideon of the Trials. All right, here he is, the newest Gideon. And yeah, he's pushed. I mean, I won't mince words. This is a great card. If you're lucky enough to open it, pick it. You'll be happy you did. I mean, here's the deal. 3 casting cost, and yes, it's a 3 loyalty planeswalker, but easily can be +1, and the +1 protects him. And if you're already ahead on board state and you're not worried about protection, he can get in there and rumble. The Gideon emblem probably isn't going to play a huge role in the limited game, because at some point your opponent's probably going to find an answer for this card. Or if they can't, you're probably winning anyway. So I don't really see that playing a huge role. Not to say that it never would, but I think for the most part, you're going to be happy to play this just for his first 2 abilities, quite honestly. As far as standard goes, a lot of folks have been thinking about how to brew up some sort of Gideon tribal deck where you're playing a bunch of these and a bunch of allies of Zendikar. Now, here's the deal. Ally of Zendikar is maybe one of the most powerful cards in the standard format, quite honestly. So as long as it doesn't get banned or anything like that, there is potential that someone could come up with a formula to play this Gideon deck, and it could be decent. I think it's going to be tough to do, though, because I haven't really been able to wrap my head around how you're going to make that consistent. You don't want to be in a situation where you're drawing too many Gideons that you can't play and they get stuck in your hand, stuff like that. I'm sure there's a way, and I'm looking forward to see what comes out of that concept, because I'm pretty sure we're going to see week 1 somebody try to do something with that deck build. But I'm just kind of waiting to see right now to see if that can pan out. But I do think as long as Gideon Ally of Zendikar is in the format, there's definitely a chance that that could potentially be a deck at some point. Gideon's Intervention. Now, this is more of a sideboard card. It's a decent sideboard card, though. In limited, I'll board it in if there's a threat that I can't necessarily easily deal with the rest of my cards. Or in standard, kind of the same thing. I do think this will see some play out of sideboards. Glory Bound Initiate. Now, if there's one card we're going to see today that makes me feel like that white weenie always watching deck is a possibility, this is it. First off, in limited, this thing's a house. I mean, if you can attack in on turn 3 and do a 8-point life swing, you're having a pretty good day, quite honestly. I mean, this card's awesome. And in standard, if you couple this with always watching, this thing's a powerhouse. Definitely one to watch in the future. Gustwalker. Now here's another fine 2-drop for you in limited. 2/2 for 2. Also has some upside on top of it. Becoming a 3/3 flyer when you exert it. Now, I like this a lot actually as a 2-drop, because early on, hopefully I can get in there for maybe 2 or 4 damage. Then my opponent plays something that can block it, and I can start exerting it every other turn, getting in for 3. It feels like it's got some legs to it. Now, it's still 2 toughness, there's still a level of fragility to it, but I'm only paying 2 mana for it, and I think there's a lot of value there for 2 mana. So again, I don't think this is necessarily like pick 1 or pick 2, but I think highly in the pack, maybe a pick 4, pick 5, something like that. I feel like I'm getting good value out of that pick. As far as standard goes, this could be a part of the always watching deck. It's only 2, and I feel like it could get across a lot of damage, especially with the +1/+1 from always watching. So this is definitely one to watch. Impeccable Timing. Of course, this was a reprint from Kaladesh, and if you played it recently in Kaladesh, you kind of know that It's a card that is very acceptable in Limited. It's not necessarily your first choice for removal, but sometimes it's your only choice for removal in Limited. So you'll be happy to play it. There's certainly nothing wrong with grabbing one or even two of these sometimes. There's more definitive and probably stronger ones, obviously, in Standard, so I don't think it will cross over there, but good for you in Limited. In Oketra's name. This is good if you're going wide, especially if you're going wide with zombies. Maybe you're in Orzhov colors or something like that. If that's the case, I would pick this up. This is one of those cards you'll be able to pick up a little bit later in a pack because there won't be a lot of people necessarily either in the archetype, or maybe you can snag it before someone else who's in the archetype gets it. Again, these will be frequent. There'll probably be more of these going around than players will need, actually. So don't overdraft it, but at the same time, grab one of these. A lot of times it's going to be good for you if you have that build. Mighty Leap. Again, another reprint you're probably familiar with. It's been in a number of sets now. Decent limited combat trick, and it also can get very aggro if it needs to, and I do like that versatility. I like sometimes someone attacks and I can jump up in the air and kind of sneak block their flyer. Sometimes that's a huge swing. And then other times if I'm ahead and I'm just trying to close out a game, that extra damage or putting something in the air can be very, very relevant. Oketra's Attendant. Now here's another super strong limited card. This thing is easily first pickable. 3/3 flyer for 5 mana, but I love the combination of cycling and embalm. They work so well together. If I can't get that second white or something, then I eventually might have to cycle this away to try to grab it, but I don't lose the utility of the card. I can still play it one time as an embalm card, and if I do get my mana, wonderful. I play it, my opponent deals with it once, I get to play it again, they have to deal with it again. This card is actually pretty awesome. Now, unfortunately, it's 2 white and 3, so you know who this is competing against in Standard, but still, awesome, awesome card in Limited. Oketra the True. This is a very strong limited card as well. Of course, this is a mythic. It's the White God. You're not going to see it all the time, but I really like this card. First off, it costs 4, and if it was a forecasting cost enchantment that said pay a white and 3, create a 1/1 white warrior creature token of vigilance, I would be on board to play this card in Limited. That kind of mana sink is actually awesome. Now, staple to that card, the fact that this thing's a 3/6 double strike indestructible creature, as long as you have 3 other creatures on the battlefield, that's phenomenal. In Limited, that's not super hard to do, especially if you just play a lot of cheap creatures, maybe have a little bit of token generation. This card itself can generate tokens. It's not impossible to turn on. I mean, there are times where it'll be awkward if you're behind and you top deck this thing. It won't be super great for you necessarily. But again, the token generation might keep you alive long enough to kind of get your legs back under you, and you might be able to even stabilize. The card's awesome. Definitely play it if you get the opportunity. As far as Standard goes, I do think we'll see play there too. Again, this could be the top end of that white weenie, always watching deck. It could be amazing there, potentially. Definitely one to watch. And I also think in Commander, I'd love to play this even as a Commander in a white deck that's playing a lot of small creatures or a lot of tokens. Could be a lot of fun. Protection of the Hekma. This one I'm not super excited about. Basically, you have yourself a 5 casting cost enchantment that does nothing on its own. It's just waiting for your opponent to attack you or try to damage you in some way. Now, maybe I sideboard this in if my opponent's going super wide with a lot of 1/1s or something like that, but I don't see myself using this very frequently, quite honestly. Same thing for Standard. It's got the same issue of 5 casting cost and being very niche. Next, we have Regal Caracal. And at face value, 3/3 for 5 doesn't sound exciting, but when you look a little closer, you realize this is actually 7 power and toughness for 5 mana. That makes it a really good limited card, actually. Very swingy card. I like this one quite a bit. Again, I would pick this real high, maybe even first pick in a lot of packs. I'm not even too concerned about the Lord effect. I mean, that's a nice bonus, and sometimes it will come into play. But just the amount of power and toughness I'm putting down for 5, I'm really happy with that. As far as Standard goes, again, we have the same 2 white and 3 situation, unfortunately. Because this feels like it would be awesome maybe in a white weenie deck, but again, Avacyn's even good in those decks, so unfortunately, I don't see this card beating her out there. Commander, though? Anyone in the mood for some cat tribal? I think that could actually be kind of fun. I don't know what that looks like exactly, but I'd like to sit down and try to figure it out. Renewed Faith. Now this one's a reprint, and it's not super exciting. This is one of those cards I board in if I'm up against a hyper-aggressive deck and I need some sort of way to stabilize my life total in the mid-game or something like that. That's about it. Other than that, it doesn't have a whole lot of utility. Red Crop Spearmaster. Here's another one of those exert cards that actually, when you're exerting it, is quite good. It costs 3 for a 3/1, but it can attack in at least every other time as a 4/1 first striker. Now, without first strike, this card seems very mellow, right? It's not a very exciting card. But again, if you can give it first strike even every once in a while, maybe you have a way of mitigating the exert cost periodically. Its stock goes up a little bit. However, I will say there's a lot of really good 3-drops in this particular color. We've already seen some. There's even more to come. So it's going to be competing with those. As far as standard goes, maybe this makes it into the always watching archetype, perhaps. But again, it's competing with a lot of good stuff. Sacred Cat. Here's another sideboard card for you in Limited. It's not anything that's super exciting, but again, if you're up against that aggro deck, you can use this to block maybe for a couple turns in a row and just allow you to get that extra time to get your mana out and start to establish yourself. Seraph of the Suns. This is another fine limited card. 4/4, flying indestructible for 7. Not bad to have one of these in your deck. Sparring Mummy. Another good middle of the pack pick, I think. It costs 4 for a 3/3. Those are just fine stats for you in limited. And then when this enters the battlefield, you have the potential to perhaps mitigate a exert cost at least once during the course of the game. It's pretty good for 4. Supply Caravan. This might not always make your cut in limited, but I don't think it's bad at all. So if you need a 5-drop and you end up picking this up late in a pack, it might be playable on occasion. It's a nice little blocker. Todd Crop Elite. This one's okay. It is a little fragile being a 2/2. At least it's in the air, though. I could see myself playing this, though, in a lot of builds and being pretty happy with it. Again, it's maybe not first, second, or even third pick a lot of the time, but especially if I'm in a go-wide deck, I'll be happy to play this. Those Who Serve. This is actually a nice little competitive 3-drop, a 2/4 for 3. That feels really good. A lot of times you're paying 4 for 2 4s. So I like the cost economy of this card, and because of that, I'm probably happy to run this in the 3-drop spot. Again, there's a lot of good 3-drops. It's got some competition, but this is very limited playable. Time to Reflect. 1 casting cost, instant removal. And it exiles the target creature as well. That's actually pretty good. Okay, it is contingent on the fact that you have to have a zombie in the combat interaction, so you are jumping through some hoops, but you know what? As long as you have a fair amount of zombies and or embalm creatures or something like that in your deck, this will certainly be runnable. This is a very aggressive disruption. Now, as far as standard goes, I do think the zombie tribal deck could potentially be a thing. If it is, this will certainly see play. 1 casting cost removal always seems to find a way. In fact, this card itself might make that zombie deck actually competitive. Trial of Solidarity. Well, here's the trial for white. Again, this is going to be a little bit better if you have a cartouche or 2 in your deck to be able to reset this once or twice during the course of a game. And of course, this really is catering to folks that are trying to go wide. It's much better in those situations. So it's not for every limited deck, but if you're in the market for something like this, you're already going wide, you have a cartouche or 2, then it's definitely a good card in certain builds. This works really well with exert cards too, so maybe another reason to pick it up as well. True Heart Duelist, another 2/2 with some upside for 2. And this thing's got Embalm, it can block 2 creatures. It's a serviceable limited card, but even if you're playing it out of the sideboard, remember it's there when you go up against those aggro matchups, especially those Rakdos decks. This could be really good against some of them. Unwavering Initiate. Another fair card for limited. Again, this you can pick up maybe late in a pack, and it might still make your playables. It's a 3/2 for 3 with Vigilance and Embalm, so it can come back. I think there's enough value there for 3. Vizier of Deferment. Now, I'm usually not a huge fan of playing 2/2s for 3 in limited, but this has got a lot going for it. First off, it has flash, but maybe most importantly, the fact that the effect is really super versatile. You can do a number of things. I mean, anything from removing a creature from a potentially sticky combat situation, maybe after a combat trick's played, to exploiting a enters the battlefield effect for a second time, or resetting an exert card to mitigate the exert cost. all of that just kind of rolled into one card, and probably then some too that I haven't even thought of. So yeah, this is actually pretty decent. I'm happy to run this in limited. Vizier of Remedies. This one's maybe a little less exciting. If I have some of those green cards that say I have to put -1/-1 counters on my own stuff, then maybe I do run this, or I board it in if my opponent's playing black and they're hitting my stuff with -1/-1 counters. But it is a little bit of a utility card, not something you're necessarily starting out with. And finally, we have Winged Shepherd. This is just another serviceable, kind of middle of the pack, maybe even end of the pack pick. It's a nice Vying Vigilance card with cycling, 3/3 for 6. I like the cycling because if you do stumble on mana, you can cycle this away. That's actually pretty awesome. So another card I'm more than happy to play in limited. Having said that, those are the white cards. So we're 1/5 of the way through. Tomorrow we're going to be back with all of the blue cards, and we'll do the same thing again. And over the course of the week, we'll work our way through the set. So until next time, hey, thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful. Please remember to like and subscribe. And have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.